It was late October, just a few days before Halloween. My friends and I decided to take a camping trip deep in the woods. We wanted to get away from the stress of school and spend a weekend disconnected from everything. There were 4 of us. Me, my best friend Caleb, his girlfriend Mia, and our buddy Jake. The campsite we chose was isolated, miles away from the nearest town, surrounded by dense trees, with a small lake nearby. It seemed perfect. We arrived late in the afternoon, set up our tents, and got a fire going as the sun disappeared behind the trees. That first night was calm. We cooked hot dogs, shared ghost stories, and laughed under the stars. Around midnight, we called it a night and retreated to our tents. As I lay there, I thought I heard faint rustling outside, but I brushed it off as the wind or an animal and fell asleep. The next morning, we decided to explore the trails near the lake. As we walked along the water's edge, Jake pointed out something odd: footprints. They were bare human footprints, and they looked fresh. Why would someone be walking around barefoot in the woods? It was a good question, but none of us had an answer. We shrugged it off and continued hiking. Still, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that we weren't alone. That night, as we sat around the fire, the woods felt different. The air was colder, and the usual sounds of chirping crickets and rustling leaves were gone. We joked to ease the tension, but none of us could ignore the eerie silence pressing in on us. Then we heard it, a twig snapping in the distance. We all froze. Caleb grabbed the flashlight and shined it toward the trees. "Probably just a deer," he said, but his voice lacked confidence. Another snap came, closer this time. Jake grabbed another flashlight and scanned the tree line. For a moment, we saw nothing, just shadows. But then I spotted movement, a figure standing just beyond the reach of the firelight. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice shaking. The figure didn't move. It was a man, tall and thin, wearing ragged clothes. His face was obscured by shadows, but I could see that he was barefoot. He stood there, completely still, watching us. "Get out of here," Caleb yelled, holding up a stick from the fire like a weapon. The man tilted his head as if amused, then slowly backed into the darkness. We stayed close to the fire, too scared to go to our tents. For hours, we sat in silence, listening for any sound of movement. Finally, exhaustion got the better of us, and we agreed to take turns keeping watch. I volunteered for the first shift, sitting by the fire with the hatchet close at hand. The woods were silent, but my nerves were on edge. Every rustle of leaves made me jump. Around 3 a.m., I heard it again. Footsteps, slow and heavy, circling the campsite. My heart pounded as I scanned the darkness with my flashlight. And then, I saw him. The man was crouching next to Jake's tent, his hand on the zipper. I stood up, gripping the hatchet. "Hey!" I yelled. The man turned to look at me, and for the first time I saw his face. It was gaunt and pale, with wild eyes that seemed to glow in the firelight. He didn't say a word. He just stared at me for a moment before darting back into the woods. The commotion woke the others, and I quickly told them what I'd seen. Caleb grabbed the flashlight and hatchet, determined to scare the man off for good, but we couldn't find him. The only trace of his presence was the footprints he'd left in the dirt, circling our tents. That was enough for us. At first light, we packed up and left. The hike back to the car felt agonizingly slow. Every snap of a branch or rustle of leaves made us jump, convinced the man was following us. When we finally reached the car, Jake stopped dead in his tracks. "Guys," he said, pointing to the driver's side window. There, smeared in the dirt, on the glass was a single muddy handprint. We never spoke about what happened after that trip, and none of us have gone camping since. But sometimes late at night, I still hear the sound of footsteps in my mind, and I wonder what would have happened if we hadn't left when we did.